All right, so with that, I just want to introduce our presenter for tonight. His name is Paul Hill, and he works for Purina, and I will tell you, he came to me very highly recommended by our last presenter. If you were able to join our last beef workshop, we're super thankful to Jeff Ward is how we were referred to Paul Hill, and so Jeff told me that there wasn't anybody better that knows more about nutrition than Paul Hill. So we're excited and glad to have him join us. I'm going to let him introduce and maybe add a little bit to his background as far as beyond maybe his work. And then with that, I'll just turn it over to him and we'll get going.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, you sound great.
Perfect. Well, my name is Paul Hill, and I live in Nunn, Colorado. I work for Purina Animal Nutrition, which has been in the business for 125 years. This is our 125th celebration. Everybody can see my screen as well, correct?
Yes, it's good.
Okay, let me, with that being said, I am so forth called the Purina show expert in this part of the world. It's actually not technically part of my job, but it's something that our family lives to do and loves to do, and it's a great way, we believe, to raise our children, and to it's actually how the way we met. So kind of interesting little point, but we raise a small herd of Simmental and Simmental Angus cattle. We exhibit our first cattle in Denver this year as a family. It was a couple years in the building, but this was the reserve champion pin in the heifer show in Denver. Once again, you can see that this is what we do and what we love to do. So I'm going to do my best to share my knowledge with you guys. I'm not scared to answer any question that I can. And if I can't, I will find somebody smarter than me to answer it. So, few more of our cattle. This is my boy's first purchase that started this whole deal. For you kids out there that you see everybody buying the high dollar ones and going across the country to find the ones on the internet sales. I bought this one for $2,500, and she ended up being the spring heifer at Louisville, or in Minnesota State Fair, 200 division in Louisville. This is a few more of what our family has accomplished, and this is some of our cattle that are all been fed Purina. I don't want this to be a selling point tonight by no means. This is more of an educational point. So I always want to start this off. I tried to play a video earlier and I couldn't get it to play, but William H. Danforth started Purina in 1894, 125 years ago. William H. Danforth worked for his father on the rivers as they were pulling the barges, and he figured out that the horses were running out of energy. So he put together a diet. He was a very educated man from the Washington University chemist, and he put together a diet called Omeline, and it's still together today. It's called oats, clean, and molasses. And Purina actually stands for pure in agriculture. It was started, the checkerboard came from the Brown family, and the Brown mother on the river would always put her family, as they sold vegetables, would put her family in checkerboard clothes so she could find them. And if anybody's a 4-H parent, they know that sometimes it's easier to find your kids if you can spot them from that. Hold on one second, it's clicking here. There we go. We took it to extremes many times in the past, but he founded it in 1894, and if anybody in the 4-H system probably knows this, there's an I Dare You Award. The I Dare You Award is I dare you to be yourself, I dare you to be your best, I dare you to be better tomorrow than you are today. And that is still an award within the 4-H Foundation that is still sponsored by William H. Danforth. And I guarantee most everybody's heard, I dare you to aspire nobly and serve humbly. I think that is a good quote. And I think you also need to take that quote to the next step as we win humbly and we lose humbly. So William H. Danforth, very educated man. You can look him up, and we still sell through the Danforth Foundation the books. It's a short read. I challenge every 4-H leader to buy one and pass it around. There's even a place to put your name and pass it through. And it also puts back into the scholarship fund for the 4-H. So he always thought of standing tall, thinking tall, smiling tall, and living tall. William H. Danforth also had the same philosophy when it came to animal production. Good feeding, good breeding, proper sanitation, and sound management. It's pretty funny how these 4 key components are the same key components that are used in today's agriculture. And we'll get to that a little later. So at our research farm right outside of St. Louis, we have a companion animal research, wildlife, deer, equine. If anybody's an equine, it's very neat. It's pretty intense to watch a beast like that run at 25 miles an hour on a treadmill, and to be able to stand in front of a horse and not get ran over is a pretty neat Snapchat video. I would tell you that much. So we also do dairy. Purina is part of the Land O'Lakes program. So any of you older 4-H members that are looking for internships or things like that in the future, you can go to landolakes.inc.com. And of course, with the butter division, we're very focused in the lactation and the growing of those dairy animals. Also, we have swine research, and my favorite, the beef research. So those little necklaces they're wearing are actually sensors that allow animals to only eat at certain gates, cannulates. So we can judge how much they're eating, when they're eating, how much forage they're eating. So that's part of our intense research. We also have that in our chickens, which is really neat to see to that if there's any backyard chicken lovers. Another really interesting point is we have a brand called Missouri. It's spelled Mazrui, and it feeds 90% of the zoos around the world. It also feeds your dolphins. As you see in that picture, as I talk about your dolphins, that is our taxpayers' dolphins. That is our reserve forces, our armed forces team of dolphins and seals that go out and search for bombs and things like that. So, interesting thing, I thought when I started with Purina that a zoo feed room would be really, really neat, but it's really just a bunch of freezers with dead animals. So it's not very herbivores compared to carnivores. So with that being said, what determines success? I definitely believe that this goes back to our 4 squares, where better breeding, better breeding, expressing the genetic potential, the ones we're going to select in conformation, soundness, stoutness, better management, cleaning our barns, showmanship, hair care, foot management, things we do at home, better feeding, knowing what they're intaking every day, getting the most out of them, getting the best body score condition we need, getting the bloom and the finish we need, and as well as better health, vaccinations, proper sanitation, health programs, and veterinarian care, which I would also include our VFDs, which is our veterinary feed directive. So if you need to feed a antibiotic feed, you would have to have a VFD, which would encourage you to have a close relationship with your local vet. I would also point out some of those things as we progress through the deal. Better management. I don't think that the cows on the right side are going to gain any weight. That was a feedlot pen of mine, of customers, and it was after a rain about 4 years ago, and there was, you can definitely see the rate of gain. Now the ones on the left, yeah, they can get out of the mud, dry off. Yeah, there's some mud in there. I'm not saying that you have to have the most luxurious type of pinning and system like that, but you definitely need to have shade, some ventilation, fresh bedding, clean. I probably am the only kid in the world that can tell you that I won a junior national heifer show, and that heifer, that red Angus heifer, lived underneath a shade tree her whole life. But it was nice and cool. We had fans and things like that. So make do with what you can, but worry about that animal the most. Better management, that's our daily prep. We've got to be able to train that calf. We've got to be able to train that calf to be tied. Remember, when you're training that calf at home, as we get closer to fairs, it's usually about a 10 to 15 minute class. But before that class, it takes us about an hour to get them ready. So now we're an hour and 15 minutes. Then we have division. That's another 15 minutes, 30 minutes on top of that. So try to do the math according to your county fair and the goals that you've put to be able to get that animal in shape to be able to do that. With that being said, when we get out of school, we have we put that animal to work. Yeah, we've been working them, but usually when we get out of school, outside of sports and other academic things, that animal has a job. So we're rinsing it every day. We're practicing showmanship. They're standing up longer. When we start into the summer, you're going to see about a 20-day threshold where that animal will not gain any weight, as it is burning calories, just like we would if we were exercising. So your daily calf management, hair care. I would say the length and the amount of hair is not nearly as critical as the hide of that animal. Of course, hair care can show a lot about how much you're working and hide some flaws, but also that hide's very, very important as well. The cleaner environment, the better hair you're going to have, especially if you have a white animal or things like that. You don't want them staining in urine or their feces or things like that. So make sure you're taking care of that animal the same way you would take care of yourself. When you get started, that's my trio, or two of the trio. Be patient. These projects don't happen overnight. Get to know each other, be able to work with each other. It takes time. I see more kids get frustrated that they just give up on their animals, because these are not rational thinkers. They are arithmetic thinkers. If you think of a cow in the pasture, they usually graze at the same time. They usually drink at the same time. They chew their cud at the same time. They're more arithmetic thinkers, and you'll learn that as you get through and you're practicing and you're working. When you get that animal in a routine, they really get into rhythm and working on things. With that being said, it is okay to get them out of their comfort. We've got to get away from our buddies, our feeding buddies. We've got to be able to show at different times. I know in Colorado, and Wyoming's a little different because you're spread out through the day in different times, but break that animal of little things. Make sure you get them outside of the barn in a closed environment and work your way up to that, but practice. At our house in the summertime, we rinse. We'll feed about 6:30 in the mornings, and we rinse. And after we rinse, we use a show stick on them while they're cool and comfortable. And then we do that again at night before they go out to get them out of the routine, so they learn when they quit being jerks, and they would be able to get rewarded after they've accomplished what they've done. Showmanship, I said this a minute ago, practice presenting them. On the side profile, you always want it like your pictures. You know, on the side profile, be able to work your animal. Use that halter to be able to show that animal. Sometimes take that show stick out of your hands. Just try walking them into it and practicing with them. A short time is more and more frequent is better. At our house, we kind of judge off radios, songs. Usually a song's about 3 minutes. We try to practice 2 to 3 songs. Start off with 1 or 2 songs, work your way up. For your parents that are listening, I don't think Stairway to Heaven actually counts. I think that's like 2 or 3 songs. So practice, practice, practice. The more time you spend with that animal, this will increase your chances of being able to present this animal and have that judge look at that animal. Because remember, 80% of this is presentation, and the rest of it is with elbow grease and the rest. So we talked earlier about better health. My kids are going to sleep, so I apologize. I'm in my office, but they're right across the room. And the 15-month-old, he likes to scream a lot. But better health. I would say I see a trend of kids buying animals across the United States as we get into the internet sales, and that loses some of the little more local advice or guidance that you have. So make sure you follow, get with your veterinarian and the breeder you bought for. Make sure you get up on your vaccinations, get on a good deworming program. Like I said, cleanliness is always better. That's better for your hide, your hoofs. We stay away from any bacterias or things that'll get in that. Get on a true health program. Get with a veterinarian. And as we talked earlier, your veterinarian is the only one that if we get one that's sick and we need to feed it from shipping fever or something like that, get in accordance with him on him or her on the BFD. So we're going to get into the bread and butter of ruminants. So the basic nutrition. I'm going to try to throw us down, and I didn't explain this earlier, but I'm actually from Missouri. I've lived out in this part of the world for 15, 16 years now. So I do have a little bit of an accent, and I probably will never lose it. So if there's some broken English that a Wyomingite cowboy doesn't get, please let me know. But let's get on the basics. A ruminant. I do completely believe that somebody or something developed these ruminants so they'd be able to go out and digest as much grass or put it in them as much grass as they could, and then be able to digest that later on. Pretty amazing how a ruminant works. So they take a plant per se, a fiber, and turn it into a digestible protein where no other stomach can do something. So it is a fermentation vat, just like we would make beer or wine or cheese or something like that. It is a fermentation vat. It must keep the rumen healthy if you're going to succeed in the show ring. So, of course, disregard the udder on this beautiful scimitar. I did not raise this one, but I stole this picture. Here's an easy kind of, you can look at your show animals and kind of see how that works, where the esophagus, how they come into the rumen, and how it works around that. So as you can see, as it travels through the reticulum to the rumen, into the reticulum, through the omasum, out the omasums, out the small intestine, and then, of course, out the anus. So for all you kids out there, it took me 6 years of college to realize the importance of what is really going on in a cow. And what's really going on in that cow, in that ruminant, ruminants don't have acid. So they have to find a different way to digest it. So in that, we call them the bugs. There's these little bitty creatures that are crawling around, digesting the forages, the grains, and turning them into usable energies and proteins. So we're going to start off with the rumen. The rumen is a very interesting piece of the pie. The rumen is a 55-gallon vat. And if you see on the inside of that rumen right there, it looks like it's a shaggy hide. You see there's papillae. There's little finger-like things on there that will absorb all the nutrients in there. So it looks like an old shaggy carpet. It can hold 55 gallons. That's a giant trash can. It's covered, like I said, with thousands of bacilli. It's a high absorption area. And this is a good point in any quiz or anything, it's 39 degrees Celsius and 101.5 degrees Fahrenheit. So it has no oxygen there. So it's anaerobic. Within that rumen, it has a giant microbial population, the giant fermentation vat. In 1 milliliter of rumen fluid, you would find 10 billion bacteria, 1 million protozoa, and 10,000 fungi. So that's pretty amazing how many little creatures or bugs live in that rumen and help digest it. So there's 2 different microbes, and we're not going to get too intense, but the different pH. So when we talk about fiber compared to starch, that would be our haze compared to our grain. So the reticulum. So that's the honeycomb lining in there. That would be where our honeycomb tripe comes from, our menudos, things like that. A lot of people enjoy it. It's not for me. That's where our microbial digestion takes place, and that's where, when we have hardware, which hardware is when a bovine would digest a piece of metal, and then it would roll around in the rumen, and then it would land there, and that's when it obstructs the reticulum wall, and that would lead to hardware and swelling around the chest. And that it actually looks a lot like pap for the high altitude kids. So, and then we go to the O-mason. The O-mason is a fine lining. This is where we're starting to get into more of a human-like or a horse-like type substance. So we've taken that forage, we're getting it smaller in particle size, our absorption's smaller. This is where a lot of our water is absorbed. And then we get into the O-mason, and then this is where we really truly get into a monogastric stomach. This is where the smooth lining is, that would be like in our gut, and this would be a lower pH. And then we have 150 feet of our small intestine and large intestine. So if you guys are really thinking about how the magnitude of what your 1,400 pound steer, 1,350 pound steer, it'd be about 150 feet of intestine. If you kids really get bored, walk that off or take a string and see how long that really takes. So we're talking about better feeding. I'm not talking about a better ingredient or something like that. I'm talking about a better feeding that we can consistently intake. We can grow them the best we can. We can get them fat like we want to, as we discussed earlier. We want that show ring look, that show ring bloom and flesh. And then, of course, our hair. And then in today's show ring, we want that muscle. And then we also want that depth, that Springer rib, that functionality type rib that we're looking for. So I wanted to point this out as we talk about the bug. And you'll see this a lot in weaning scenarios, or if we take a steer or heifer to town, how they go off of feed. So normally we think it's stress. So when it's stress, we get a little bit of acidosis or a little bit of a temperature, and then that changes our rumen. So if you look on the left, that'd be our normal rumen, and then when we get to a show, that'd be our effect of our stress. So it's never more frustrating when you have the prettiest hay in the world and your cow reaches underneath the fence and bites the nastiest, cheapest hay that they possibly want. And the reason they want that is because they're wanting lower energy, lower calorie, a plainer type feed, because they don't have the microbes. When we're talking about the bacteria and the protozoa and the fungi, they don't have that built back in their gut to digest that high calorie feed that you're on before. So remember, as we go to town, to bring them animals back on feed, slowly, dehydration will cause a lack and a death of the microbial population in that room. And so just kind of something to think about when you go to town and they go off that. That would also be why sometimes when your animal doesn't eat and then they eat a lot and then they have the runs of the shows because they don't have that microbial population to digest what we're trying to intake. Show calf nutrition. If you don't remember anything this hillbilly says, I will tell you right now that this is the number one most important thing you could possibly imagine in children. In the wintertime, I don't like drinking ice water. I know it's tough in Wyoming, but try to do the best you can. Summertime, especially when we have the majority of our show animals, don't let them go out there and drink boiling water. I always bring this up when we go to shows because a lot of our animals will not be on city water per se or water with chlorine. So we try to use a charcoal filter. If you use a charcoal filter, no matter how impatient you are, it does not work when you turn the water up all the way. So let that charcoal filter the nasties, filter the chlorine, and things like that. Flavoring agents, you can use those. Electrolytes are a good tool, but when you use too much electrolytes, it has too much salt in it, which would cause dehydration of the cells, which would cause muscle loss. So that would make your animal appear not as stout, and things like that. So take that into consideration, just a few pointers that I've learned over my 20 some years of showing animals. So when we feed them, we always want to have an end in mind. And in Wyoming, it's a little tough if you're showing steers because your end in mind is county fair because you can't sell at state fair. So when you have your end in mind, do your math. Figure out how many days you have to your show, how much weight we need to gain, and do the math. What I would say is that 3 pound, if your average daily gain needs to be 3 pounds, you're kind of on that green light. If you get above like 3, 5, 4 pounds, you're looking at kind of a yellow light at 3.5 and then red light. A lot of times you got to take consideration of stress when the kids get off. We start working them every day, and we got to get those things clipped. We got to get their feet trimmed. We got to put other stresses on them before the show. We got to haul them to town, things like that. So take advantage of that. Rule of thumb. Or things like that. Usually rule of thumb is about 7 pounds of grain to 1 pound of grain. Feed individually as possible. Live, I like doing a little demonstration where I put the kids up and embarrass the dad and things like that, just to show that the little ones can't keep up with the big ones, and the big ones sometimes don't need to eat that. So if you can feed them individually so you can see the intakes, I would suggest feeding twice a day. That seems to keep the microbial population in that rumen functioning better. I also would say that feed twice a day. When we feed twice a day, in scenarios where we need to gain a lot of weight, I would suggest feeding 3 times because we can get more intake into them through the day. Try to feed within an hour, top side, bottom side of the day. I know we got sports and everything like that, and according to heat and things like that. If it's hotter, wait till later, feed earlier, get your butts out of bed. When we're making changes, increase the feed slowly. When I tell somebody if you're changing a feed or adding a supplement or making a big diet change, do that over 7 days. Mostly I tell people to do that 7 days because it'll give that microbial population, that bug population, time to adjust. And if I tell you do it in 7 days, you're probably going to do it within 4. So increase your feed slowly. Another thing I would point out is you can get some, I already stole one from her, but you can get those digital scales, and I stole my wife's, before Denver, I stole my wife's male scale, and it must have not been very expensive because she didn't complain very much. But when we have mom feeding, we have dad feeding, we got little sister, big brother feeding, all our scoops are different. And a 3-pound coffee can is not 3 pounds of feed. So use that to your advantage around your barn. I would also say we like putting up a goal sheet, not a goal sheet, but a board that has a calendar on it for our females. That way we can watch estrus. We know when we bred them. We know when we deworm things, when we weigh steers, vaccinations. We also put some goals up there, what we want to accomplish, because everybody's goals are different in the show. From making the sale to winning the sale to being able to feed that animal as cheap as they can. There's so many different goals, and your family needs to set them goals for what you want to do. I'm just here to help you guys get a few goals that I can help you accomplish. As far as the hay, I know Wyoming can grow the best alfalfa hay in the world, but that does not mean we have to use it. What I would suggest on these show animals is free choice good. I emphasize good. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be bad. Good grass hay. Make sure if you're feeding a total mixed ration to your animals or something like that, make sure we are able to have stems that are longer than 2 inches or flakes that are longer than 2 inches if you're feeding ground hay or something like that. That way, if it's shorter than that, they can't digest it, chew their cud, and go back down. So I would say a second cutting grass hay is what we try to accomplish. We don't try to get protein out of the hay or energy out of the hay. We try to get the energy out of that feed bucket, use that hay is more of a body depth ruminator, letting a cow be a cow. When we talk about show cattle nutrition or cattle nutrition, we talk about protein. Protein usually needs to be on a grower ration. It needs to be about a 13, 14-ish. 12 and a half can get you there and things like that. And then when we think about protein, protein is what builds muscle, and that's what builds everything. But when we get too much protein, that's where our fitter 52s and our higher other competitors that things have products like that, we get into higher proteins that essentially puts an animal into a Atkins diet, or a ketosis is the new thing, so a higher protein like that. So remember that 14 to 12 is kind of a grower, and then as we get lower, protein as we get higher allows us to grow higher and get skinnier. As we lower protein, it widens us out. When we talk about bypass proteins are used very heavily in the show ring. It's also, we found out about it through the dairy industry. So we could feed large amounts of protein to a dairy animal, and it would bypass the rumen and then go into lactation. We also learned it in deer. We use bypass proteins to control deer antlers. So they won't absorb it, but it'll go into their horns or their antlers. So remember that, bypass proteins and the proteins. We talk about proteins and bypass proteins. Sometimes things might read at like 32 or higher like that. They're really not absorbing all that. Remember that when you're adding things in that. When we talk about breeding heifers, if there's any kids that are feeding breeding heifers, this is the time of year we should already had a cycle on them. But we need to get those heifers bred, and they need to be a little lower intake. I wouldn't sacrifice as we're trying to get them bred this time of year, but we don't. A skinnier heifer is a little bit easier to breed than an extremely obese person. Energy. So our energy is where we get our carbohydrates at, our starches, our grains, and our fats and our oils. So energy is our fat. We talk about cows in the pasture. They need energy to survive the winter. They need energy to have enough power to push out a baby, things like that. Roughages, and it tends to be a little lower density in that energy per se, but that's it. Minerals. Don't slack on minerals. It's pretty easy to put a tub out there or loose mineral. In our pens, we keep a salt block and a mineral tub. Those minerals are very, very important, and we'll get more. Pardon? Was there a question?
Did somebody have a question? I don't think so. I think somebody just joined us.
Perfect. Gives me a chance to take a drink. So we talk about that macro minerals, and we'll get into it. I've got a neat slide here in a little bit to kind of explain for somebody like me who's a little simple-minded how minerals work. So I don't think anybody can disagree that anything on this we need. We need muscle. We need them to eat. We need good hair coat. We need good hooves. We need those heifers to breed, and we need bone development, things like that. So these minerals, these macro and micro minerals, are so key to that animal's well-being that I would never ever slack on minerals. They need the vitamins for skeletal development. They need B vitamins to help synthesize that rumen. Vitamin A helps us grow in the reproductions, and then vitamin E. Vitamin E is a natural oxidant, also helps hides and our hoofs and keeps us from injuries and things like that. So when we talk about a cow, and how simple that I thought I could break it down, because I'm not very smart, and this is how I read it. So everybody knows how a motor works, a gas motor. So we got to have that energy, you've got to have that fuel to make it burn. That oil lubricates it so that motor can run, and then we got to have that spark, and that's spark to get that motor running. So we take that energy and protein and we put it into that cow, it makes that cow run. So if we synthesize all this together and we compare our fuel as our energy and our protein as how we lubricate and operate it and our catalyst, ultimately, that's the simplicity of how an animal really works and how a cow really works. So as we're wrapping down, I didn't want this to be a selling point. If anybody's got any questions, we've got a wonderful line of show products. I'd be glad to talk to anybody about these or have anybody talk about them, what we need to do, as well as we've got an awesome line of show supplements. I don't think anybody would disagree that beats any other brand that they've used these products. So as we're getting to the end and getting into that, you can use these for your extra fat or your muscle building proteins or belly or things like that. We have 8 great interactive ways that kind of show you how our products work and where they would work. Remember that every animal is different, and be able not to be barn blind and to look at your animal and be able to say, how can I better that animal? We're not always going to fix it, but if we better that, we can hide that in that 80% of presentation. So I get this question a lot, and this is more for the parent, but I did the math and we can't afford a dog. So I get this question a lot, and about our feed being too expensive or another competitor's being too expensive, and I can get the job done. So I did the math for myself. I'm kind of hard-headed, and I did it. So we fed an animal full sibs. An animal eats their energy. Our products are high in energy, and we can feed less. So we took 2 animals. We fed on our show chow. We fed 90 bags of that to get where we wanted to. We wanted to get 800 pounds gain, and I wanted to do it on 300 days. So it took 120 bags of the competitor and 90 of mine. The difference was 1,500 pounds in feed. $16 a bag for mine and $12 a bag from the competitor. So comes out to the same price. It took those animals that amount of bags to finish, or that amount of pallets that I bought. So I hope you can take this home. I'm going to stay here as long as anybody wants to talk. There's no dumb question, because if there's one of those, I would have got called an idiot a long time ago. This is my oldest on a national ad, and he did not listen to me. And you can see as his bovine didn't survive the fair too well. I am able to work for a company. I'm able to show cows before this, but I work for a company that has great tools. HonorShowChow.com. You can go on there and ask the experts. It actually goes to our experts, the experts that I asked. It goes to them. We also have a great deal called our top awards. If you get our supplements, our feed, we give awesome prizes away. So there's tools, there's videos, there's other things like that to use on there. I get to work with great nutritionists, top performing programs I talked about. If anybody that's ever showed cattle, I get to call this man, one of my really, really good friends, if not one of my best friends, Kurt Steerwalt. That was him and I when we got to watch Von Miller whoop up on Tom Brady before the Super Bowl. We're proven. My family can say that even before I started with Purina, that I had a lot of national champions that were fed those red bags. So pretty easy for me to trust that red bag. As well, when we were selling cattle, and as we sell cattle now, I can coach a kid through, or a parent through, feeding them by pictures and things like that. So I want all. This is the chance. If you'll do this, I'll give you some coupons. I think they're like $10 or $15 on some supplements. Mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, and grandpa, you got like 3 days to do this. So if you'll text Purina to 95323, you can send that in, do a little survey. We'll give you a coupon for some things. So that's my thank you for you guys allowing me to come talk to you and having the privilege of coming and talking to you guys. So with that, I'm going to open it up to any questions y'all might have. Oh, I see one here.
Oh, yeah.
So Tasco, it's in our feed. So Tasco is a seaweed derivative. And Tasco, what it does, it lowers the body temperature on the animal. So in times of stress or things like that, we can keep the body temperature down, which will help us with our microbial population. Also, when it's hot, when we get those 95-degree days, yeah, it's a dry heat, but we're pretty close to the sun. It helps us do that. And as we keep our body temperatures cooler, that also allows us to grow hair. So Tasco, I can't tell you the science behind it works, but it's a seaweed derivative that will lower the body temperature and then allows us to better our intakes, better our hair, better our availability of keeping that animal on.
So Paul, sorry, connected to that, there was one that was sent directly to me that said, is there like an additional hair supplement that you can feed to grow hair? An additional supplement you can feed to grow hair?
And this is not for a salesman. Tasco will help grow hair. I've never been a true believer in the hair supplements except for melatonin. I think melatonin is a naturally occurring hormone in the body that tells us that the days are shorter and we sleep longer and we grow more hair and things like that. I don't. There's some out there. I've fed some of those other ones. Me personally, I've not really seen the better effects. Now, with that being said, are you gonna, with the diet, can you adjust hair? Yes. More energy, will be fatter, a shinier type look, things like that. When we're pushing a lot of energy to an animal, a lot of fats to the animal, Especially in the summertime, that will affect your hair growth more than anything. For my kids, we sell cattle to, and my customers in this area, we try to get our animals fat early. We try to like them things about 100 to 50 pounds from finishing within the next 10 days, so we can cruise them per se, or coast them into fair, and not put a bunch of fat on them while we're trying to grow hair and not contradict ourselves. So, as far as the hair supplements, I know in Purina we use Tasco. We believe in Avela 4. That is the only things that in our feeds I'd say would help our hair. I'm not a big foo-foo guy, so I don't know if that helped at all.
Perfect. Okay, there's one more question that came my way. It's about a supplement. Can you explain the difference between the Fitter 52 and the Fitter 35?
Fitter 52, of course, we're talking about bypass proteins and high protein type diets. And so the Fitter 35 would be a 35% protein, and it's made to burn fat, be fed on longer times. Maybe will not show a muscle gain by no means, but it's a longer acting, fatter burning tool. And Fitter 52 is a souped up version of that. Now, with Fitter 52 being said, there's a lot of science behind the bypass proteins. It will burn fat fast. I would suggest taking a picture on your cell phone. And with that being said, we are in the cell phone era, the digital era. Take pictures of an animal. If you think that something works, prove yourself. Take a picture, feed it, change something. Then you have something for you. Or if you have an extension person or a breeder or somebody like me, we can kind of help you through that. So Fitter 52 will burn fat fast and will build a smidgen of muscle. 52 or 35 is longer acting. Kind of two different protein setups and two different protein masses, but essentially they're both fat burning machines.
Okay, there's another couple there in the chat box. You probably can see them. There's one that says, besides putting in the time with your animal, does anything work for calming?
Melatonin is one thing that helps. I know there's a product called Focus and some other ones, Calf Calm and things like that, have tryptophan in it. Tryptophan is the same ingredient that's in turkey that causes us to be sleepy. On that. So on the natural supplements and things like that won't test, those would be the three things I would suggest. I know there's another, somebody in Nebraska makes one as well. We actually used it on our bottle calves, and it was tryptophan. And when you have a 2, 3, and a 4-year-old out there, I thought it worked. I sleep after Thanksgiving, so.
All right, there's a couple more in that chat box. It says, how much feed should we be feeding our steer at this time? He needs to be 1,200 pounds by August 1st. We are going through 7 bags of Purina every 2 weeks.
One steer?
Erilyn, can you unmute yourself? Maybe, do you have a big, like how much he weighs right now? And then is it one steer or more?
One steer.
One steer.
Do you know how much he kind of weighs right now?
We can guess.
What would you guess?
I would guess 900.
Okay, maybe that gives him a spot.
That's
so
a
we have
guess.
300 pounds to gain before August 1st. So I took 1,200, and then is that your goal? 1,200 pounds, correct?
Right.
And then we'll subtract 900 from what he is today. That leaves us 300 pounds. How many days do we have a quick calendar to see how many days we got, or a rough guess? 30, 60.
Like 78?
Yeah, 38 days. So And a lot of this is going to depend on genetics and things like that. We didn't really talk about it, but deworming, this time of year, we're shedding hair. I know in Wyoming we got a few jackpots left coming up. I know Laramie's got one. I don't know where the Riverton one is and things like that. So we've got a few of those left. So then I got 300. So then we divide that by 78. So we've got to gain 3.85 pounds a day. What I would say is you're on a yellow light. Do you know what Purina you're feeding?
It's the show feed. It's in the red bag.
There's 6 different red bags.
I don't know. I'd have to go and look at it. We go grab it from our steer leader, and then I don't even think about it.
Okay. So what I would suggest on your steer at this point, we got some room to go. We got quite a ways to go. I would look into feeding the tar out of him. Weigh your feed, get as much feed into him. I'd also incorporate another energy source. Our energy sources would be power fuel or heavyweight. Heavyweight is 70% fat. It'll put fat on one fast. It is comes from the milk replacer group, but it's not milk replacer. A lot of people feed milk replacer, but I've also seen a lot of animals die because of bloat because of milk replacer. So there's an anti-frothy. 70% fat. If an animal gets sour on it or we hurt that rumen, they will never eat it again. So if you use that, start really slow. Power fuel is our go-to in our house. It's a 20-some% fat. You can take a grower and add 1 cup of power fuel and make it a finisher. So if you take a finisher and add that, we're getting extra energy in there. 1 cup of power fuel will be the same equivalent to 7 pounds of corn. So if you can get 8 ounces in one of those, you're getting another 7 pounds of corn worth of energy. And it's a different kind of energy, so it doesn't hurt the feed as much. What I would say in your scenario, that thing needs to be eating we got to gain 4 pounds a day. You need to be eating about 30 to 32-ish pounds, somewhere around there. So you got to feed a lot and feed hard. I wouldn't go to 3 times a day quite yet. I would hold off on that, but try to get as much consumption in those 2 times a day. See on that red bag what you're at. If you're on the full range, you can add a cup to that. If you're on the fitter's edge as our grower, we need to start thinking about moving over to a finisher.
And we're going to be moving to a finisher here pretty soon. We're just waiting for our steer leader to make that move with us.
Okay, yeah. And I kind of, like I told you guys, we do it a little different in our house. We try to get them animals, we try to take advantage of winter. We try to take advantage of that cold weather and push as much calories and feed to them early. And then we can pay a lot of catch up at the end and cruise into that. So anything in the future when you start next year. Also, don't waste calories. So what I say by that, don't use any fillers like depth charge, ultra full, or any other feed companies type filler products or belly products. Don't waste those empty calories with calories that will gain weight, because most of the time, and you'll see this in feedlots, steers that are closer to their finish and more mature will always have enough belly. So worry about getting calories into them first, and then worry about that belly later in the future. Did I help you, Erilyn?
Erilyn.
Okay.
So how do you feel about corn oil being put on it?
So I grew up in the era of Golden Flow. Golden Flow was the big hurrah in the late 80s and the 90s. So what we have learned So golden flow is good, or corn oil is good to a point. Now it's a high energy when we talk about hair and things like that. So if you guys see me, when we have our papillae in that room, you know, the feedstuffs can fall in between it. But when we get too much corn oil that drips over it, we start folding our papillae down and they can't absorb those large particles. When we feed too much oils, that's the reason we will see the diarrhea. It's not so much of the oil, it's the absorption of those nutrients that went down because the papillae are not able to absorb that. We've learned, and even the dairy industry is really, because they're the ones, that's the reason we use the power fuel type fat, so it's not weighting us down. It doesn't weight that down. It digests, it still absorbs like an energy. When we get into the soy oils and the corn oils, I think it's a cheap source. It's a cheap source of energy. It makes things look shiny. It makes you feel better. It smells good. But in the end, I think we're just shooting ourselves in the